Welcome to The Inclusive Shift, the podcast where we explore what it really takes to build workplaces that embrace neurodiversity. I'm Nic Nagtzaam, and in each episode, I sit down with neurodivergent professionals, leaders, and experts to hear their stories, challenges, and insights on creating inclusive workplaces. Today, I'm joined by Seamus Hart, a neurodiversity consultant and advocate who shares his lived experience and learnings with the world. Seamus, welcome to The Inclusive Shift.
Oh, hi, Nick. Thanks for adding me to the roster. It sounds like really an awesome thing to be talking about.
Absolutely. So, Seamus, you've openly shared your journey being diagnosed late in life with autism and then with ADHD. I'd love for you to walk us through your journey of being diagnosed.
It's actually a pretty long journey, and I think it's the same with a lot of other people who get diagnosed late in life. So originally I got an Asperger's diagnosis, which at the time there wasn't a lot in terms of interventions. I wasn't really considered at the time for ADHD or ADD because of masking factors around autism and Asperger's. It was something that I kind of put off for a while. Plus there wasn't a lot of intervention practices pre-2010s for adults specifically. So I struggled probably for a good 10 years. I then ended up getting re-diagnosed under the DSM-5, which was ASD level 1. And that allowed me to get some basic accommodations at work that I really needed, just around things in writing, around some of the sensory considerations. One of the big doors that opened was realizing that I actually can't read under fluorescent lights. So what it meant was that I missed out a whole heap of academic work at school and ended in the workplace. So could address that. Kind of went on for a couple of years, and I realized I needed a little bit more support, and that's where I was re-diagnosed with ASD level 2 and with ADHD. So it was basically a bit of one of those things where huge crash and realizing that actually I'm a lot lower functioning than I thought I was. And that was due to masking and also not being able to kind of separate out the autism from the ADHD, which is kind of really common. You address one thing and the other bubbles to the top. And I've heard a lot of late in life diagnosed, they get, let's say, an ADHD diagnosis, they get medicated, and they also realize that they've got autism or some other neurodivergent condition attached to the ADHD. So I don't think it's like a clear-cut thing. And I also think now it's a lot better for a lot of professionals because the science effectively is catching up to a point where a lot more individuals are being picked, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And you're right. I think they've coined it, the lost generation, where most of us, because we didn't fit within the existing DSM criteria when it was originally designed, now that the DSM-5 and the updates to the DSM-5 have come out, we're now bubbling up to the surface and being diagnosed with, be it ASD or ADHD as well. More recently on LinkedIn, you've described the grief cycle after being diagnosed with ADHD. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that felt for you?
It's an interesting thing because a lot of late in life diagnosed people like me, what they realize is that they've effectively been running in hard mode for a very long time. So if you're a 90s kid, I got this great game would have been when I was in high school called Battletoads. Hardest game you can possibly play. And that's kind of like a lot of neurodivergent people is they get games that are played that are way too hard, and discovering why it's so hard, it unlocks so many doors. So for me, originally when I was diagnosed, it made a lot of sense. So things like the constant fatigue, the crash cycles, the things that I couldn't do, it was effectively a key that explained why things were like there were barriers and they were so hard. So things like just being exhausted for seemingly normal things or going through these cycles. It's like when you get that ADHD diagnosis, it's very validating. Even with an autism diagnosis, it's very much the same thing, that it actually explains your wiring. Although I have to say, like being diagnosed with both, very different. With autism, it was very much because you can't really medicate it in like from a medical lens. It's one of those things that's very validating where it's like, okay, so yeah, that makes sense. With ADHD, it's very different, is that I never really thought I'd be ADHD. I just thought it was like autism and that's it. What I found is that it unlocked a lot of the reasons why I am the way I am, which was great because it validated it with fatigue. It's like, oh, well, you're just not being able to do stuff. Or from a good example is I spent probably a good 5 to 6 years working out why my cortisol was all over the place, and ADHD kind of explained that. So you go through that and you're like, yeah, I got that explains it. And then you get kind of the grief hit out, because what you realize is that, like, being in my 40s, I'm like, I've gone effectively 40 years without any medication for ADHD where I've absolutely needed it, which means I've just missed out on a whole heap of, like, a lifetime of opportunities that I probably won't ever be able to get back. So there is a bit of that and the bargaining around it, and then finally kind of you come around to it. But it's for me, the autism and the ADHD diagnosis is very, very different. And I would probably say the biggest one was the ADHD, because I think at school that medication would have made a massive difference for me, especially about the concentration and the jumping onto different things. And where the autism side, it's more structural things and environmental, which are really easy, like taking around a whole heap of the noise cancelling headphones, like at the shops or at school or at work. I mean, that's probably the easiest thing. Where ADHD, very different ones, but it's you go through a very specific cycle on it.
Yeah, I too carry a set of the loop earplugs with me almost everywhere, especially when I go back into the office, because after working from home for 4 years, going to an office, it's so distracting, and I'm just like, nope, earplugs in.
Yeah, I got a pair of the Audio Technica ones, and they're awesome. So I just like connect them up to a few devices, and it just, yeah, they're just an absolute lifesaver.
Was there a moment that it kind of all really clicked and you began to see yourself differently?
I can take that from two very different points with my autism and Asperger's diagnosis. So I've had 3 of those diagnosed, 2007, 2017, and then 2022. For me, it was validation of kind of what I already knew. So like I always kind of knew that I didn't fit into certain kind of social molds, which made a lot of sense. And I was kind of aware of the sensory things, but I couldn't quite articulate it. That really gave me the language and the structure of why I can't read under fluorescent lights, or why certain sounds actually trigger a physical response. The one that was really surprising for me was ADHD, and it was my partner who actually kind of said, I think you might be ADHD. And what I'm finding that was the real shock, getting a diagnosis for that, because I also noticed that I'm very on and very off, which is it's probably the best. It's like I'm a 10 or a 0. There's nothing in between. That kind of explained that. And it also explained a lot of the physical stuff that I've been looking at from other medical perspectives and couldn't quite nail down. For that, it was a little bit different, because with ADHD, commonly you can medicate it. And it's like, it was a little bit more upsetting from the point of view. It's like, well, if I was in high school and I was on, let's say, Ritalin, that would have made a huge difference to me being able to actually finish school properly. And it's part of the reason why I'm catching up for it now. So it's one of those things about with ADHD, it's more of about why it's hard and all these kind of little missed out bits and why your wiring is the way it is. Yeah, that's probably the biggest insight I could take from it.
So, I mean, you've said that it would have made a huge difference if you were in high school. If you take a look back now, what do you wish someone had said earlier in life to you?
Well, I think this is probably common for anyone who's ADHD or autistic. The big thing for me is that I had from high school just drummed into me that I was lazy and stupid, and the things that were bothering me didn't really matter. Younger me would have really liked to have known that actually the sounds behind me, I can't function. So a well-meaning teacher moving me to the front of the classroom is the worst thing to do, because I've now got all the sound and this distraction behind me. Also, the other reason is that, I've got terrible handwriting, and it would have been great to have some supports there. So I couldn't keep up with a lot of the note taking in high school. The other one was 90s baby here in high school, everything's fluorescent lights. So I wasn't taking much attention because I could see the flicker with a lot of the lights, so I couldn't actually read anything. So I probably lost at least like 5 years of school there, just not being able to pay attention or really focus in classroom. It was a bit from the ADHD bucket and a bit from the autism bucket.
I can definitely relate. I've recently went back and started to review my transcripts from high school just to see how they were worded. And there was lots of needs to apply himself better, or I'm just like, okay, I get it.
That was mine. That was the stuff that was in mine. I even had a well-meaning English teacher basically turn around to me and goes, "Don't go to uni and don't do a degree. You're not smart enough and you just can't do it." I really felt like sending them the transcript from one of my degrees. And again, it's one of those things where you get that on a daily basis. I was reading somewhere it's autistic students get far more negative comments than neurotypical students. So it's no wonder a lot of us, we get out of high school and we've got absolutely no confidence.
Yeah. So if we take a bit of a step forward then and jump into the workforce, I noticed more recently, or that you on LinkedIn as well, that you have publicly announced, be it your workplace accommodations, right? Not something that most people would feel psychologically safe to do. What led you to make that choice?
I guess the point is that, and I'm a contractor, so I burn out of places really fast. Part of it's neurotype is that it's like I get to the end of it and it's like I can't physically do that job anymore. And really, I've kind of come to the conclusion, if I don't talk about it, well, who else is going to? And a lot of the accommodations are really simple things. So for instance, like any neurodivergent person, they're going to have sensory problems. So it's like the cheapest accommodation you can put in there, and this is quite a fair bit of peer-reviewed literature reinforces this, like headphones, noise-cancelling headphones, cheapest thing you can do. The other one as well, which is a no cost, is flexible working, like ways of working. So for instance, ADHD minds have a delayed circadian rhythm, which means that we tend to be more active at night and later in the afternoon. We're not morning people, and there's a whole heap of reasons around dopamine and cortisol levels, and we usually wake up and our dopamine's completely depleted and our actual circadian rhythms are actually delayed, so we're better for later in the day. So easiest thing you can do, flexible work, let them work to their chronotype. Other things as well, put things in writing. ADHD mind, like if someone gives me verbal instructions, I'm not going to remember it. That's another big one in meetings. So a lot of neurodivergent individuals will fidget on meetings, and it's for a whole heap of different reasons, from stimming to actually concentrating. I remember a lecturer saying to me, as a kind of a really good, and it really stuck, is if an ADHD person isn't fidgeting, it means they're not listening. It's because they're using all of their effort to actually go, don't move, don't move, don't move. And it's like, you can accommodate that really cheaply and easily by just saying, well, if someone wants to turn off the camera, turn off the camera. It doesn't really hurt anyone. They're still involved with it. But yeah, I just came to the conclusion that if I wasn't talking about it, who will?
That's beautiful. How do people respond with that level of transparency, be it colleagues or leaders?
It's really funny. It's one of those things that's actually led me to a lot of different places for advocacy. If I didn't start talking about it, I wouldn't have done a whole heap of talks at work, and I wouldn't have ended up on SBS Insight. It's not one of those things that I intended to go like that, but I found probably two key learnings that for me, going into an organization and being able to talk about it, there's a level of psychological safety in there, and that's probably a good place for me to work. People who are shut off from it fairly quickly, if I'm talking about it and they're not interested, well, I don't really want to work with them. So from the point of view, it's a bit of a benefit of actually being able to align myself to the right businesses who are going to give me the tools that I need to work. So yeah, I don't really see it as a negative. I just see it as me grading it down. And I think also there's a lot more focus on neurodivergency and specialized thinking within the workplace. So it's kind of a little bit of a connection there.
Okay. So if we have a bit of a look then on what good supports look like in a workplace, what would they be from your perspective? I know that they're going to be completely different depending on the individual, but there's always generally a series of shared accommodations that we can apply or help with a series of individuals, right?
Oh, you're absolutely spot on. I think the way that a lot of people look at accommodations are special treatment when they're not that. Think of it like this: it's a business tool. If you're giving someone dual monitors as a programmer, it's like there's a very specific purpose for it. If you're giving, let's say, a designer a Mac, it's a business tool. Accommodations are exactly the same thing. The easiest ones are usually the best starting point, and it at least opens the conversation for people to then go a little bit deeper and do more individualized support. But the easiest ones are noise cancelling headphones are a no-brainer in an open planned office. Number two is put things in writing. And I mean, that's just good management. It makes things understandable, trackable. People know where things are. So it lowers a lot of the communications differences without going into the double empathy problem. It just reduces all of those different problems. The other one as well, flexible work. It's like, especially in digital, like you're shooting yourself in the foot if you don't have flexible work, because you can also get people to cover different time zones based upon their chronotype. So it's huge business benefit. It means that you're not just locked to 9 to 5. Also, the other thing is office space. Like if you're doing flexible, you're not paying as much for as many seats. The other things as well is just like putting in talks, getting people into actually an awareness piece on different neurodivergency types. And, the same thing that we do with a lot of the cultural and LGBTQ things that go around the offices, they're hugely beneficial for communicating needs and where people may fit. Because I mean, statistically with neurodivergency, it's like 1 in 7 are going to be neurodivergent. And it's like when people say, oh, they don't have any of those in their office, it's like, no, statistically you would have to. It's not that you bring extra ones in. They're already there. They may not even know it yet. They may not even be diagnosed. So I'd say the information's a huge piece.
That's right. I think what the last census said that it's 11.9 or 12% roughly that are within the workforce. However, obviously there's significantly more that are unemployed. I think it's around 38, was it 38% that are unemployed or something like that?
Yeah, it depends on which demographic you go down to. It's when you break it down to different neurotypes. So a UK study I saw, 4 out of 5 autistic people are out of work. With ADHD, you tend to get a huge turnover of employment. So you'll see someone's resume with about 30 different jobs over 10 years. It's not a cultural thing. It's usually to do with lack of support, lack of the right supports and medication, or interventions, or they burn themselves out. So it's really, really super common with women with ADHD that they'll hit perimenopausal or they'll hit 40s, and there's a ton of insights on this where they crash, they get their diagnosis, and that's when they get the support. But it's like, I think a lot of it, you're doing a disservice if you're not talking about it and you're not supporting staff and considering it's the science. When you look at it, there's a lot more out there than they think. If your business not jumping onto it, it's just kind of reducing the capacity of your kind of workforce.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. So on the flip side then, do you still see systems or assumptions that get in the way of providing those accommodations to people?
All the time. I think the biggest one is probably politics. So the perception I've got from places that some of it's like, oh, accommodation, it's special treatment. There's others that just kind of don't see the need for it. And then there's others who are just, it's a very old management style. It's not that they're morally or ethically good or bad or against it. It's just how the company culture runs. And I think it would be a huge generational shift to shift that mindset. And there are some businesses where you can't do that for a whole heap of different reasons. And it's not saying that they're bad companies. It's just how they operate. They're a certain class of product where they're looking for a certain culture that may or may not align to neurodivergent values, and it goes across all of them. And I think you could probably look into a couple of studies on that which support that fairly well.
Absolutely. So being diagnosed so late in life then, have you really had an experience with unmasking, and how has that really impacted be it both you personally and professionally?
That's actually a really, really deep question. Masking from an employer point of view, what they will see is it through mental health, burnout, and what they think is a performance issue. And it's not. It's just someone's given everything they can and they've just fallen apart. They just don't have the right supports in place. From a masking point of view, and this is probably me going through a little bit too much philosophy over the years, I think you can bucket it into two things. You can look at from a Jungian archetype, you can look at this is the personas that we take to work. So everyone does this. It's not just autistic or ADHD. It's across, everyone has different masks that they put on. They usually have a value to yourself, and it's like how authentic they are. Unfortunately, if you're autistic, you just kind of have to become more of the role to actually get a lot of the acceptance I've found. There's that aspect. It's like the social roles we play, which you'd probably say are conscious. Then there's the flip side, which is the unconscious stuff. And that's what I found the real troubling part from my perspective, is that it's taken me a long time to unpack that there was a lot of things that I was doing purely unconsciously. Didn't even know, just like, oh, okay, didn't know I was masking. It's not until you actually start looking at those behaviors. And then this is what comes with a lot of diagnosis. A diagnosis in the purest sense is an existential question, because you've just gone, oh, here's what you are, and you unpack it. So masking is one aspect of it, but it's also kind of the flip side. It's like, who are you really? And that's, I think, the thing that and it was definitely my challenge, midlife, getting a couple of diagnoses. And it's like, well, who am I? Why am I doing these things? Are they serving me? Am I doing this for these reasons? Is it something that I'm interested in? And it's like, I actually found out I was doing a lot of things just purely mask, and that's from external expectations, or that's kind of what I needed to do. So yeah, it was a bit of a long story with that.
I really appreciate it. Actually, it's probably the most in-depth example I've been given about masking, and it's one that's made me have a bit of a think as well. So I do appreciate the forethought there. Jumping a little bit more into the workplace, do you feel as though workplaces are ready to start supporting individuals to unmask, or do you think that we have a little bit of a way to go there?
Ooh, that's actually a really good question, and it's something that I'm asked a lot. I think if you look purely from a corporate point of view, unmasking is effectively risk profile. So it's not necessarily them saying, oh, we're going to get people to unmask. It's more the fact of what is the risk profile attached to not getting the right support. It means that there's a whole heap of people that are masking extremely well who no one suspects they're neurodivergent, and they're not getting the support they need. So and from a business point of view, they're at risk at burning them out. That's where the drive is going to come from. There's the other flip side as well from the individual, and it's like they're going to go to companies where they're going to be able to support their needs. And from a Maslow chart, you can think, well, it's, I get paid and roof over my head and but when you're getting up to the high levels of like the meaningful work and actually getting supported through kind of meaningful accommodations, completely different thing. And I think you'll see a lot of the neurodivergent workforce congregate at certain companies because they give them everything that they need. So the flexibility, the sensory support, the chronous support, the the structure that they really need, and that understanding. But I think we're just kind of at the renaissance of that now. So it's like it's really kicking off.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. There's probably a bit of a ways to go. I also think that line managers or any people manager should be trained in psychological safety or psychological first aid.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think I've stated that quite a few times, is that if you're managing someone who's neurodivergent, you need training in it. And I'm completing a grad certificate in autism studies and looking at maybe doing the masters. And what's really shocked to me is that I've got a lot of the lived experience over 40 plus years, but like there was so much I did not know about the processes and the structures and the type of supports that you actually need to put in to support those people. So like, I think you're 100% on the money with that. They need to be trained.
I guess the question becomes, are organizations willing to train their line managers in psychological safety or for psychological first aid, right?
Exactly.
It's a big fork out, but I think at the same time, it has a huge benefit and a huge value.
Yeah, I think you are right. And I still think it falls down to risk mitigation. I think it will be one of those things where they'll work out how much it would cost them in liability and they'll place that on, well, actually, no, if we put this in there, we're getting a better net outcome. Plus, it completely obliterates the risk profile on having untrained people managing people with very specific needs.
So what does advocacy look for you now? So how does your approach to communicating your needs change over that as well?
That's a really good question. Originally, I kind of went out there because I needed some very specific needs. I'm just putting on the selfish hat for a second. So I needed some needs and support in a company, ended up having to get another diagnosis and getting a psychologist to go all these things, which weren't like huge asks. And I guess I kind of flipped from that and then realized that there was actually quite a lot of other people who were pre-diagnosis, diagnosed, or completely like hidden with it that needed exactly the same things. And when I started talking about it, the really good companies had jumped onto it and supported it. And there were quite a few that said, oh, do a talk about it. And I've even had times where at one place I did a huge hour-long talk for Autism Awareness Month, and it was, absolutely huge. And I had some senior leader come over to me after and say, you've just explained my childhood. Where do I get a diagnosis? So I think it's kind of shifted to more that are just realizing like how many people are out there who don't know where to actually go to get the validation. And I mean, it's as simple as going to the GP and saying, I think I'm these things, get me to a psychologist, or even doing pre-screening ones. There's a lot of information online that's extremely well tested and a valid measure that will, at least, it won't give you a formal diagnosis, but it will kind of like give you a little bit of information to go to a professional and say, well, these are the things that I do, and this kind of where it aligns. So it's giving you a bit of a better understanding than just going in there and going, oh, I think I'm this, and kind of getting talked out of it, which does happen.
Yeah, it definitely does. I guess the challenge at the moment, at least here in Australia, is that the wait times to be diagnosed can be 6 to 12 months just to get in to see a psychologist nowadays. And I guess that's stemmed probably more from COVID, right? And people becoming more aware of themselves and the mental health crisis that came post-COVID as well.
Absolutely. I think you've hit it on the head as well. And I think, if anything, what COVID did was a lot of people in isolation actually got thinking of who they are and what they wanted to do, like from a whole heap of different levels. And I think there's a lot of people who actually kind of realize that they might be neurodivergent, or they didn't realize a lot of the challenges that they actually had at work had a biological or neurophysiological reason for it. And I think it's just kind of gone from there. I think it's an unintended output of work from home.
I agree. So for someone then that's listening and that might be going through this current roller coaster of emotion, what would you say to them?
Say probably the best thing is to eliminate the doubt. If you can't afford, because as we've said, it's extremely hard and expensive to get a lot of those medical diagnoses, reach out to the community. For instance, it's one of the best sources of information and tips and tricks where to go to. I mean, it's how I ended up meeting my partner through Autism Awareness Australia. So there's a lot of support within there, and a lot of them are more than happy to say, well, this is how my process went. This is kind of where I actually moved on to and did what I needed to get the, the support I needed and validation. And there's others who kind of meet up with the groups and they go, yeah, that's 100% me. And then what they get doesn't necessarily need a formal diagnosis because they're just needing like some really good hacks for it. Or the other one that I've noticed post-COVID is parents of neurodivergent children just realizing, actually, that was me at the same age. And then just kind of learning a lot of the hacks and the tricks off what the kids' treatment is they're like, oh wow, the sensory thing made sense, or the light thing made sense. I don't think there's just one path to go. I think self-identifying is more than valid, especially when you look at the barriers for getting those pieces of paper to say that you're autistic or ADHD. But I think it also varies very heavily on each person.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think self-identification and doing those self-assessments is a great way to help you get a better understanding of yourself, at least initially, before going down. If you do then choose to go down that formal diagnosis path, at least you have a base level of understanding and information with you to start that journey.
I think that's really well said.
So turning the tables then, do you have any questions for me?
I guess probably the big one is you've spoken to a lot of people on these types of subjects. What are probably the top insights that you've found? Because there's probably a lot of things that you've just kind of like talking with people, connecting, you've just found something. So what is it?
I think it's dependent on the diagnosis and the environment that they work in, right? So I recently sat down with a long-term friend of mine who's dyslexic and had a conversation with him about his diagnosis and the accommodations that he needs in his workplace. And that obviously would vary depending on your type of dyslexia, whether it's dyscalculia or dyslexia, right? But for him, leveraging things like Grammarly to help him with his grammar and spelling and things like that, or leveraging a calculator or your phone or ChatGPT to help with answering or wording different responses to people. Alternatively, if we go down the path of ADHD or autism, the flexible working times has been a key one there. The ability to flexi work, so be it work from home, work from the office, depending on how you thrive. There are obviously those that thrive better at home. There are those that love being in the office and love being in that open environment. I personally would much rather be at home where it's quiet and less chaotic. I think we've recently at work gone through and implemented the Amaze reset rooms as well. And they have been quite good. People have really approached them and said that they're amazing, be it execs, directors, and people on the floor. They've all had an opportunity to kind of take a pause, reset themselves, re-regulate themselves, and then come back into the workforce. So I'm really glad to see tools like that are helping within the workplace, as opposed to just looking at small accommodations that everyone should have anyway, which is things like the noise cancelling headphones or the ability to work in a quiet room with no fluorescent lights, just the ability to dim the lights and just get your work done.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's like, I mean, you mentioned a couple of really good ones, and I can't live without Grammarly, and I use ChatGPT a lot. It just means that I can chuck a whole heap of things in there and it makes a list of what I need to do. The other one as well, which I thought you were just about to hint on, was Goblin Tools.
I haven't heard of Goblin Tools, to be honest.
It's great. I had a dyslexic friend actually put me across to it, and it just breaks down complex tools into complex tasks into manageable things. Because big one for me, I'm overwhelmed all the time. So if I whack it in there, it just goes, this is what you've got to do. And it's like, okay, more manageable.
That's awesome. I'm going to check that out. Like I'm really interested to see how that would work.
Yeah, it's a really cool tool. Some I forget who it was again. Yeah, that helped them with some challenges around dyslexia, and they're like, maybe you need to use this. And it's I've just used it all the time. It's great. And then also the other one as well, Grammarly. One of the big things for UX, for any UX designers out there, is the ability to switch from passive to active voice. A lot easier to read and understand, and it's one of the things where we tend to write in passive, which is a little bit more verbose, but passive is like way more accessible, and it's like it's the smallest thing.
Yeah, that's right. And if it's a $250 tool and it's going to give you such a great outcome, it's very inexpensive to make someone's life so much easier.
One of the best tools ever.
Awesome. So before we wrap up then, is there anything else that you'd love to leave our listeners?
Ooh, that's a good one. God, I spoke about so much. I'd probably say your best way of accommodating other neurodivergent employees is literally with your time. That's the difference, and just understanding the perspective. Like that makes a huge huge difference. And if there's things that don't make sense to why they're doing, there's probably a very, very good reason. And it's like it just comes from just connecting with someone.
Awesome. Well, Seamus, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed it. I've picked up a few new things